Before I start my commentary, I gotta echo what Jim just said about eating clean and eating healthy. I used to be on antidepressants, and my son used to be. He had asthma and stuff, and was taking medications for that. And then we, started eating vegetables, stopped eating processed food, got off gluten and dairy, and cleared up skin issues, joint pains, and all that stuff. So. This week's Torah portion is Devarim, Hebrew for words. This is also the Hebrew name for the book of Deuteronomy. There's a passage in this portion that I think relates to the time we're approaching here in the United States, the presidential election. This week, I'd like to take a look at the question, should Christians vote? Now, I know that this can be a controversial and divisive issue, but I hope this commentary isn't. Found out, I was reminded again on Facebook the other day that it's really hard to avoid controversy sometimes. So, now I believe this is important and, as with all areas of our lives, should be guided with scripture and biblical principles. I could probably give a whole sermon on this topic drawing from all over the Bible, but with my limited time, I'm going to focus on passages from this week's portion. Hopefully, even if you disagree with my conclusions, this will still be a beneficial time as we look at Scripture and get an exercise of applying it to our lives in this present age. To set things up, the author starts out in Deuteronomy 1, stating these are the words spoken by Moses in which he starts recapping previous events. I'll start with the passage that reminded me of voting. Deuteronomy 1:13. Choose wise, understanding, and knowledgeable men from among your tribes, and I will make them heads over you. And you answered me and said, the thing which you have told us to do is good. So I took the heads of your tribes, wise and knowledgeable men, and made them heads over you, leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50s, leaders of 10s, and officers for your tribes. This is a recount of when Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, advised him to have others help him judge the people. First, notice Moses told the people to choose the men who would be heads over them in verse 13. Also, notice how the leaders were over different numbers of people, similar to the governmental structure we have in the U.S., with the president, governors, mayors, senators, different branches of government, etc. And we see the people thought this was good. Now, this was just Jethro's idea, but in Deuteronomy 16, we see that the people were again instructed to select their leaders. Verse 18, you shall appoint judges and officers in all your gates, which Yahweh your God gives you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgment. This command was given between commands for keeping feasts and to not erect images. Two commandments that most Torah-observant Christians have no argument with. This verse doesn't say how the people were to appoint their leaders. I've heard that perhaps they casted lots, but I couldn't find that in Scripture. It might be there. I found where lots were cast to divide the land and to give duties to the Levites, but not for choosing leaders. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't do it. And of course, I don't know anywhere where it said they voted. Perhaps both methods were used among different tribes, or neither were used by any tribe. For us here in the U.S., that's the method we currently have. And that method fits in with the spirit of this scriptural instruction to appoint our leaders. Now, I've heard, read, and discussed reasons that Christians should not vote. I've heard some use, or personally I would say misuse, Scripture to support those reasons. I only have time to look at one of these reasons, but it's one that I hear often and I believe can be countered with a passage from this portion. It's all rigged. Our votes don't matter because the system is set up to fix the election for whoever the elites want in power. I am in agreement that it's rigged, but I don't believe that's a reason to abstain. There are good people involved in politics who are fighting to make a difference. The deck is stacked against us with cheating going on and secret societies behind the scenes, probably getting controversial now. But that means we have to fight even harder. Britain recently showed that the establishment can be beaten when they voted to exit the European Union. The mainstream media and probably most of those sitting in power were pushing to stay in. It was over a 20-year-long fight to even get to the point of voting. And then there were examples of fraud going on in favor of staying in the Union. People were told to bring their markers to vote because they only had pencils, and then police were coming and telling people not to share markers and all kinds of stuff. But in the end, the establishment was defeated with 52% of the people voting to leave. More importantly, we have scriptural examples of God overcoming natural odds. Here's one from this week's portion after the spies returned from the promised land with a bad report. Deuteronomy 1:27. And you complained in your tents and said, because Yahweh hates us, he has brought us out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites, to destroy us. Where can we go up? Our brethren have discouraged our hearts, saying, the people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and fortified up to heaven. Moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there. These statements remind me of a lot of the statements I hear about voting. They've already picked a winner. My vote won't make a difference because of the system. There's nothing we can do about it. Here's how Moses responded to the Israelites. Verse 29, then I said to you, do not be terrified or afraid of them. Yahweh, your God, who goes before you, he will fight for you, according to all he did for you in Egypt before your eyes. And in the wilderness where you saw how Yahweh your God carried you, as a man carries his son, in all the way that you went until you came to this place. Is the U.S. government too much for God to handle? Are the elite more powerful than he is? Are the secret societies so secret that even the creator of the universe doesn't know about them? Pharaoh had all the power in Egypt, but it was nothing compared to the power of God. The Israelites faced much greater odds than we do today. Now, let's look at how the Israelites responded to Moses. Yet, for all that you did not believe Yahweh your God, who went in the way before you to search out a place for you to pitch your tents, to show you the way you should go, in the fire by night and in the cloud by day. Instead of acting in faith, the Israelites let fear prevail. If we were to apply this to voting in the U.S. today, in the spirit of Deuteronomy 16:18, how are God's people doing? This article said from 2004 to 2008, only an average of 55% of born-again evangelical Christians voted in the general elections. This is pretty consistent with other reports I've read and heard, including one I read about last election in 2012. And from talking with people, I get the feeling that's about where we're at here. So we are doing better than the Israelites. Only 2 of the 12 spies brought back favorable reports, and everyone else went along with the bad reports. But we can still do better. Deuteronomy 16:18 was given to all the people. But, unfortunately, we know that most Christians disregard a lot of the other commandments as well, like the feast days also mentioned in that chapter. I mean, how would we feel if only half the people were keeping the feast days in this church? Let's look at how God reacted to the Israelites' lack of faith. Verse 34. And Yahweh heard the sound of your words and was angry and took an oath, saying, surely not one of these men of this evil generation shall see that good land of which I swore to give to your fathers, except for Caleb and Joshua. Verse 39. Moreover, your little ones and your children, who you say will be victims, who today have no knowledge of good and evil, they shall go in there. To them I will give it, and they shall possess it. But as for you, turn and take your journey into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. Because of their lack of faith and unwillingness to go to battle, these Israelites never entered the promised land. Instead, their children would have to fight years later. And how did they react to this rebuke? Then you answered and said to me, we have sinned against Yahweh. We will go up and fight, just as Yahweh our God commanded us. And when every one of you had girded on his weapons of war, you were ready to go up into the mountain. How did God feel about this? And Yahweh said to me, tell them, do not go up nor fight, for I am not among you, lest you be defeated before your enemies. So I spoke to you, yet you would not listen, but rebelled against the command of Yahweh, and presumptuously went up into the mountain. And the Amorites who dwelt in that mountain came out against you, and chased you as bees do, and drove you back from Seir to Hormah. Then you returned and wept before Yahweh. But Yahweh would not listen to your voice, nor give ear to you. So you remained in Kadesh many days, according to the days that you spent there. Right now, we have it pretty easy. We don't have to get into physical battles. We can vote and make our voices heard in other ways. But I fear if we don't take part in our current battle by voting and getting involved in politics, we'll face a greater battle that will be physical. I fear Christians in the U.S. are going to be facing physical persecution like Christians elsewhere. Maybe then they'll start waking up and fighting for the truth. But I fear at that point, God won't be with us, like he wasn't with the Israelites when they finally decided to go to battle. And then, if this history is any indication, this generation who disregarded God's law and didn't appoint godly leaders will all pass away so our children can fight the battle we were unwilling to. We all have to make personal decisions on whether we're going to be like Joshua and Caleb or like the spies who gave a bad report. Now again, I've heard plenty of counter arguments and I can't address them all here and now. Like the parable of the talents, I just have to use the time I have to speak what I believe is necessary and hope and pray gets multiplied. Shabbat shalom.